Hello and welcome back to the Let's Buy a Home podcast. This week we are talking all things lifetime ISAs and I'm joined by Brian from Moneybox. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Perfect. Well, brilliant. Well, I see lifetime ISAs being used every day by my home buyers and the benefit can be huge. However, a lot of people in the UK are wondering whether or not the lifetime ISA is a good fit for them. So I thought this was a very important conversation to have. So could you please introduce yourself and also Moneybox?
Absolutely. So my name is Brian Byrnes. I'm the head of personal finance at Moneybox. Moneybox is a digital saving and investing app. We currently look after just over 1.5 million customers across saving, investing, home buying and retirement. On the home buying side of things, probably most relevant for this conversation, we believe we look after the largest community of aspiring first-time buyers in the UK. So we have a huge amount of data experience and we speak to them every single day. So we know very much what is on their mind when it comes to the lifetime ISA, but also all of the kind of wider picture of trying to get onto the property ladder for the first time. I was a financial advisor for a decade before joining Moneybox, and then I joined Moneybox, and now I do a lot of financial education work with our customers, and then also a lot of campaigning with the government and the regulators in terms of improvements to financial products and services that can make people's lives a bit easier. And again, specifically around the lifetime ISA for first-time buyers.
Fantastic. Well, I speak about lifetime ISAs all of the time, but my listeners may be sick of hearing about them from me. So I thought it was time that they heard about them from somebody else. So Brian, to start off with, what is a lifetime ISA and how do you see your Moneybox clients benefiting from them?
So the lifetime ISA is a government incentivized saving and investing product. And basically what that means is savers and investors can put in up to £4,000 per year and the government will top that up by 25%. So you can get a maximum £1,000 bonus from the government every tax year. You can use a lifetime ISA for two purposes. One is saving for your first home, purchasing your first property. And the other one is to supplement your retirement savings. And you can do both of those at the same time. That was the intention when the Lifetime ISA was launched in 2017. It's a very popular product. There's over 1 million people contributing to it today. About 3 million people have used the Lifetime ISA in some way, shape or form since it was launched in 2017. At Moneybox, we saw 38% increase in people opening the Lifetime ISA in 2024. So extremely popular product and only going to get more so. And you can kind of imagine that there's not that many places where you get potentially £1,000 free every year for the government for any purpose. And we know certainly from Moneybox customers, and I'm sure, as I say, yours as well, everybody's number one goal early in life is to get onto the property ladder, and the Lifetime ISA really helps them to do that.
Absolutely. It's an amazing tool and an amazing opportunity for the right person. Are there any considerations that somebody should make as to whether or not the Lifetime ISA would be suitable for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of considerations, and I'm sure we'll go into these in a little bit more detail as we go along, because some of these we've been campaigning to the government to update them because they've not been updated since the product was launched in 2017, and the home buying environment has changed kind of significantly since then. But first of all, you have to be under 40 to open a Lifetime ISA, so you have to open it before your 40th birthday. The second one is the property price cap. So the value of the property that you use the Lifetime ISA for is capped at £450,000. And again, that is quite generous in most parts of the country, but it hasn't changed since it was introduced in 2017. And we've seen significant increases in property prices since. And then the other one is what's called the withdrawal penalty. So I mentioned you get the 25% bonus from the government when you pay money into the Lifetime ISA. But if you use your funds in the Lifetime ISA for any purpose other than purchasing your first home or for retirement, so if you have an emergency, you need to get your hands on that money, you pay a 25% penalty. Now, you may think 25% bonus, 25% penalty, okay, that evens out. But actually the way that the maths works out is that you lose 6.25% of your own funds on top of the government bonus. And we think there's a more equitable way to do that. So those are some of the considerations. They do tend to get quite a lot of airtime kind of when people are talking about the lifetime ISA, those considerations, particularly the house price cap. Now, we see it actually impacts less than 1% of lifetime ISA users today. So we do feel that there's a balance to be struck between campaigning for what we call future-proofing the product for generations to come and making sure that the people that it is right for, which is the vast, vast majority of aspiring first-time buyers, still have confidence in the lifetime ISA, because it is an absolutely fantastic product to accelerate you towards getting your deposit together.
Absolutely, I agree. It is benefiting the masses, absolutely. I think the issues largely are primarily in London due to the property prices in London. This is where with my home buyers I see the issue arising in relation to the price cap more than any other. To give an example of that, something I may see with my home buyers is that maybe they started saving into the lifetime ISA 5 years ago, hoping to buy a property worth, as an example, £425,000. They've really tried their best. They've saved a lot of money. They've put that into a lifetime ISA. But here we are 5 years later. It may be that property price is now over the price cap. Therefore, with the withdrawal penalties, that money is essentially trapped in some ways. Although they can pull it out, nobody wants to lose out on a significant amount of money. Okay, so let's keep going with your campaigning. I understand that Moneybox have campaigned, as you've mentioned, for the lifetime ISA to be future-proofed. What exactly does that mean? And what is the aim?
So for us, it basically means two things. One is the house price cap, as you mentioned, and we are campaigning for an annual review of that house price cap in line with house price inflation, basically. So look, if house prices go up by 3%, then the house price cap should go up by 3% as well. I think you mentioned there about the £450,000 being mostly an issue at the moment for London and the Southeast, and that is true. But I don't think anybody that we speak to from a government perspective, from a HMRC perspective, from a Treasury perspective, thinks that keeping the cap at £450,000 for decades to come makes sense, because what that means in practice is a real terms cut in the value of house that you can buy with the lifetime ISA each year. And that has been the case for the last 8 or 9 years. As I say, house price inflation, you're looking, generally speaking, across the UK at 30% since the lifetime ISA has been increased, and that cap has stayed the same. So having a static house price cap on houses which are linked to inflation over the long term just doesn't make sense. So we are campaigning to the government to do an annual review each April and just say, look, what have house prices done, and can we move the house price cap in order to keep up with that? Because as you mentioned there, when we speak to our first-time buyers, some of them say, okay, it's going to take me 2 or 3 years to buy. Other people say, look, it might take me 7 to 10 years. And each person is different. They're able to save kind of different amounts, and their timeframes are different. And you want them to be able to buy the same amount of house using the lifetime ISA in 7 to 10 years' time as they can do today, and just have the confidence that it will be fit for purpose over that time frame. The other one that we are campaigning for is on the withdrawal penalty. So I mentioned earlier in terms of how it works of losing 6.25% of your own funds. Now, we are campaigning to the government to say you can reduce that penalty from 25% to 20%. So people lose the government bonus, but they don't lose any of their own money. And that won't impact the long-term savings and investing nature of the lifetime ISA. So the government understandably wants to get that balance right. They want the lifetime ISA to be for the purposes it's designed to be for, which is medium to long-term goals, such as saving for your deposit and getting onto the property ladder. They don't want people to be using the lifetime ISA necessarily as an emergency fund, as you kind of dip into if you're going on holiday or going out at the weekend or whatever that might be. And we fully support that. And we believe that you can reduce the withdrawal penalty from 25% to 20%, as I say, while maintaining that balance. They actually did that during the pandemic. So they realized that was exceptional circumstances, and they reduced the withdrawal penalty from 25% to 20% during the pandemic. And we did not see a big spike in people withdrawing from their lifetime ISAs, even though it was a pandemic and people did need access to their own funds. People still don't want to lose the government bonus, and they absolutely do not want to give up on their financial goals of getting onto the property ladder. So the withdrawal penalty can be made more equitable without disrupting people's plans to get their deposit together.
Absolutely. And I think that balance that you've mentioned in relation to the withdrawal penalty, that's so important because it's one thing if people are saving into a lifetime ISA and perhaps it becomes unsuitable due to purchase prices, but it's another thing if people are essentially being punished in some ways when they are having to withdraw that money. And the question I'm often asked on social media is, will they increase the limit? And I've always said, as you've mentioned, eventually they will. They have to eventually. It's inevitable because in 20 years' time, we simply can't have the same price cap. However, when that happens, we can't say for sure. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
Okay.
just very quickly on that one. I do have hope for 2025. So we've been campaigning on this for the last couple of years, and before each budget, we will go into the Treasury and we will speak to the Chancellor's office and we will make the case about the lifetime ISA and the house price cap. And due to other government priorities, it hasn't happened yet. Now, what's happened in 2025 is on the 7th of January, something called the Treasury Select Committee, which is a group of 11 influential MPs, launched what's called a call for evidence on the lifetime ISA. And one of the questions that they wanted evidence on was the house price cap. And we have submitted evidence and we have given all of our kind of data on the lifetime ISA to those MPs. They will write a report, a recommendation report somewhere around kind of April or May, and the government will need to respond to that. So there is a method for potentially in 2025 actually getting that change to the house price cap, maybe in the autumn budget. That is what we are hoping for, and that is what a lot of my personal activity for 2025 is going to look like, of giving the best chance of getting those changes to the lifetime ISAs, which from our perspective are just kind of common sense changes and also not very expensive for the government to deliver. So we just need the mechanism to get it done. And I'm, as I say, fingers crossed that 2025 will be the year that those changes happen.
Well, my fingers are certainly crossed. You definitely have my support. One other thing to mention in relation to the lifetime ISA is that you can only benefit from the lifetime ISA at least 12 months after your first contribution. So a lot of the time we do talk about, even if you're not ready to buy now, stick a pound in and get the clock ticking. Is that something you would advise?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no downside to doing that. And as you say, you get that clock ticking on the 12 months as well. So perfectly sensible.
If you didn't know by now, I work as a mortgage advisor helping first-time buyers from around the UK to take their first steps onto the property ladder. If you want to buy your first home, but you're not sure where to start, head over to my Instagram page where you'll find the educational content that you need. As well as that, you'll find testimonials and success stories from my home buyers. Back to the podcast. A question I'm often asked is, Dan, which lifetime ISA should I open and which provider should I use? So, how can a lifetime ISA differ from provider to provider, and what maybe do Moneybox offer that somebody else may not?
So there's two different types of the lifetime ISA to start with. There's a cash version of the lifetime ISA and there's a stocks and shares version of the lifetime ISA. The names are pretty self-explanatory, but with the stocks and shares version of the lifetime ISA, that's typically appropriate for people who are saving for 5 years or more. So if you think your purchase of a property is over 5 years away, you can look at the stocks and shares lifetime ISA. Or if you're using the lifetime ISA for its retirement purpose, you probably should be looking at the stocks and shares version of the lifetime ISA over that kind of time frame. The cash version of the lifetime ISA, again, as the name suggests, is basically a cash savings account, but where you get the government bonus, typically appropriate for people who are buying within the next kind of 5 years. When it comes to different lifetime ISA providers, the things that you need to look at is, on top of the government bonus, your lifetime ISA provider will pay you an interest rate, and there's good competition in the lifetime ISA market of getting a decent rate of interest on your lifetime ISA savings, as well as the government bonus. And then from a Moneybox perspective, as I mentioned, we believe, the largest community of aspiring first-time buyers in the UK. So hundreds of thousands of first-time buyers are saving with us. So we have a lot of experience built up in what we need to do in order to support you on that journey. We have a huge amount of financial education kind of content. We also have a full mortgage brokerage team here. So when you come close to buying, you can speak to a broker and they can advise you on your personal situation of how much can you borrow, what's kind of realistic for you without stretching your budget too much, and actually go and get the mortgage for you and advise you of the best mortgage on the market. And we also pay very competitive rates on the cash cash lifetime ISA as well. So I think we're in a kind of decent position, but those are the areas that you should be looking at when it comes to choosing a lifetime ISA provider.
Brilliant. And if a lifetime ISA isn't suitable for a home buyer, what would you advise using for saving a deposit?
So if it's not suitable, and let's take the example of you're planning to buy over £450,000, you still have a choice of the wider ISA universe, so a cash ISA or a stocks and shares ISA. And again, that is down to when you plan to buy. If you're not planning to buy for 5 years or more, you can have a look at the stocks and shares ISA. If you're looking to buy within the next 5 years, you should probably be looking at the cash ISA. And again, pretty competitive rates in the cash ISA market at the moment. And the major benefit of the ISA, as I'm sure your listeners probably are aware, but there's no tax to pay on either the stocks and shares investment gains within the stocks and shares version, or you don't pay any interest, you don't pay any tax on the interest that you earn in a cash ISA as well. So you're probably looking at the wider ISA universe rather than the lifetime ISA if, for example, you're looking to buy over £450,000.
Yeah, so if you are listening and the lifetime ISA perhaps isn't suitable for your purchase, do not worry, there are other accounts and tools that you can benefit from. I understand, Brian, in 2024, Moneybox carried out extensive research with both aspiring first-time buyers and also successful first-time buyers. What were your findings?
So the main finding, and again, this will sound quite obvious and your listeners are probably aware, but we tend to badge first-time buyers as this one homogenous group. They are all kind of the same in terms of, they're just young people trying to get onto the property ladder. What our research shows is that there is so many different angles where first-time buyers are an extremely diverse group. So just as some examples, like income demographics, for example, there's obviously an extremely wide range of income when it comes to aspiring first-time buyers. People getting help from the bank of mum and dad versus not getting help from the bank of mum and dad, and then geographically spread across the UK as well. Things like your ability to get mortgages, employed versus self-employed. So there's just so many differences within this group that we just badge as first-time buyers. And the reason that that's important is first-time buyers as a group are facing the hardest buying conditions in decades, in my opinion. So we know what house prices have done over the last 30 to 40 years. And now we're in a position where interest rates are higher than they've been in 10 or 15 years. They are showing an extreme amount of resiliency. Any broker that I speak to, and you, Daniel, you're probably still very, very busy, which is great. But we need to be doing quite a lot more to be supporting this group. And because they have such a wide range of backgrounds, experiences, and needs, there is no one quick kind of policy fix that is going to make every first-time buyer's life easier. So what we're campaigning for with the government is setting up a working group and saying, look, over the next kind of 3-4 years, however long this government is in place, there should be a program of activity of helping first-time buyers. The lifetime ISA is one part of that, but we are not claiming that if you future-proof the lifetime ISA, that will solve all of the problems in the first-time buyer kind of housing market. There's other things that need to be done in terms of mortgage affordability, overall supply of houses. So this government wants to build 1.5 million houses, which we are very supportive of. We know there is not enough supply. And then there's a lot more that we need to do around financial education. So the research that we did showed that people are still very confused about the home buying process. There is so much jargon involved in it. There are so many different players in terms of solicitors, conveyancers, all this sort of thing, that if you don't have the background in finance, you can be quite lost. So basically, as I say, our research showed that there's just so many things that we need to be doing to support first-time buyers. And as I say, over the next 3 or 4 years, we would like to see the government institute a program of activity that by the time we get to 2029, 2030, there's lots more things in place to support first-time buyers getting onto the property ladder. Because I always say to the government, it's not just about the house, like it is the financial security that it gives people for life and all of the knock-on impacts of getting onto the property ladder at a reasonably early age. We can go into that in a bit more detail, but the knock-on consequences for life are just huge when it comes to people's financial security and their wealth creation, which is the big focus of this government.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to get caught in comparison when you are buying your first home. As you've mentioned, everybody's circumstances and goals are completely different. You know, we see a lot online about the average deposit size in London, which is always a humongous amount, but you don't need an average deposit size. Okay, what you need to do is to speak with an advisor, okay, and understand exactly what size deposit you need. Okay, it may be the average size, it may be more, it could be less. Okay, and understand if you do achieve that size deposit, where will that leave you? Can you also access the mortgage? Would that be affordable for you? Would that then allow you to achieve your goal of buying the sort of home that you want to buy on an affordable basis? Everybody is different. Everybody's circumstances are different. You know, as you've mentioned, the Bank of Mum and Dad certainly helps first-time buyers, and a lot of people are receiving gifted deposits from family. If you are somebody who's in a fortunate position such as that, I think it's important to maybe clarify that with your parents, not from a place of expectation, but if you are going to receive some gifted funds, it would be nice to know about it. Reason being, it's hard to save a deposit. Therefore, you will be able to factor that gifted money into any saving plans that you have.
Absolutely. And we talked about there the interest rate environment, the price of houses, the average deposit sizes, all that sort of stuff. But the biggest challenge for first time buyers now is not getting disillusioned when that's all that they hear about. So you hear about all of that sort of stuff. You hear about other people benefiting from Bank of Mum and Dad or gifted deposits. And if you are not in that position, it's very tempting to just give up on the idea of home ownership altogether. You might just say, look, the environment is impossible. Everything I'm hearing is house prices, average deposits. I'm the only one not benefiting from a gift from a wealthy family member or whatever it might be. But again, that's just not the case. So we see the data week in, week out, month in, month in now, month in, month out of people getting onto the property ladder from all sorts of different circumstances, all sorts of different income levels, all sorts of different deposit levels. And yes, some people do benefit from gifted deposit, but lots of people don't as well. And it may take you a little bit longer or a bit longer to get onto the property ladder, but people are still achieving it. So whenever I speak to our customers or anyone comes up to me and says, look, is it actually still possible to get onto the property ladder today? I would say absolutely yes, because as I say, our data shows thousands of first-time buyers getting their first keys every single month from such a wide variety of backgrounds.
Yes, I was actually asked that question the other day. Is it still possible for young people to buy a home in the UK? The answer is yes. And evidence of that is the fact that I'm in a job. Okay, because if it wasn't possible, I wouldn't be working with any home buyers. Is it difficult? Absolutely. Does it take preparation? Absolutely. But it can be achieved with the right advice and the right preparation. Okay, so we have mentioned in relation to fixing the housing market, and that's a term that we see online a lot. What does a fixed housing market look like to you? And is a fixed housing market something that can be achieved?
That's a big question. I'm ever an optimist, so I would answer yes to the second part of that in terms of a fixed property market. Now, the big question is the time frame, and I think when we look back at how hard the environment is for first-time buyers, that is not something that's happened overnight. Like there is the constant reference back to how much houses cost in the 70s, for example, and our parents' generation getting onto the property ladder, how much that was. And there's one thing about absolute property prices. So a house might have cost kind of 50 grand back then, but actually, as we know, the key point is the income multiples. So how much a property cost back then versus how much the average wage was versus what it is today. And as I say, back in the 70s, you're talking about kind of 3 times the average salary would get you a decent house. And now you're up to 9 or 10 times. So I use that as an example of something that's just not going to be fixed overnight. There is no policy that a government could bring in or that we could campaign for that is suddenly going to change the impact of that overnight. This is something that is going to take probably as much time to fix as it's taken to get us into this situation. So it's something that we need to build on over the next kind of 5 or 10 years. What that looks like for me is absolutely much more supply of houses. So we just simply do not have enough houses for people to buy in this country. And that's why we are fully supportive of the aspiration of building 1.5 million houses over the course of this parliament. And we need to balance that off with the demand side of things. And that's what I mean in terms of support for first time buyers. So lifetime ISA, future proofing, more to do on mortgage support and affordability, all that sort of stuff. So that's what it looks like for me in terms of a concerted level of activity on both the supply side of building houses, but also the demand side of helping first time buyers specifically. So that's what we need. And it's not going to be an overnight fix. But I think if we make it a priority to get people onto the property ladder as early as our parents' generation did, it has all sorts of knock-on impact for the country as a whole in terms of economic growth and people's individual financial security as well. So it's a big prize to play for, and I really, really think it should be a massive priority of policymakers.
Yes, I agree. I believe that the housing market is never going to be in a perfect place. I think managing house prices is the most important thing. And I say managing because if you're listening to this podcast, unfortunately, house prices aren't going to halve in the next 5 years. That's not going to happen. So what we are looking to do is manage the increase in house prices over the next 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Hopefully, meaning that this generation and also the next generation and the one after that can continue to make home purchases. But if you do feel like you are overwhelmed with the housing market and you feel like it really isn't the right time to buy, what I would advise is speaking to an expert and understanding what you can achieve in the current market. Can you buy the sort of home that you want to buy on an affordable basis? If you can, then it could be a good time to buy. If not, then it's time to maybe start that preparation and work out what maybe you can achieve in the coming years. If you do maybe increase income, decrease debt, improve credit scoring, whatever that advice may be for you.
I was gonna echo that about speaking to an expert, such as yourself. People often look at mortgage brokers as just people that can help at the point of purchase. Like a good mortgage broker will be able to help you, hopefully, quite a bit before that in terms of things like your affordability, your credit score, and just be able to bounce some questions off. As I mentioned earlier, the home buying process is very inaccessible, like with all the jargon and the language that is used. So just speaking to an expert who can help break that down for what it means for your individual circumstance and hopefully give you faith and confidence in terms of what is achievable for you and over what kind of time frame, like that's just incredibly important. And from my experience, mortgage brokers do a hell of a good job of that, as well as the help at the point of purchase.
Absolutely. And it's never too early to have that conversation and lay some initial foundations. I do believe the mortgage advice role is becoming less transactional in the modern day, and it's more relationship based. I say to my home buyers, it's my job to hold their hand through the entire process. I'm in their corner. I'm on their team. It's not simply a case of submitting a mortgage application anymore. Mortgage advisors can offer a lot more than that.
Yeah, agreed.
Perfect. So one final question, Brian. What are your top 3 tips for first-time buyers who are beginning to think about buying a home in 2025?
I think the first tip is just working out what's important to you. And this goes beyond home buying. So back into my kind of financial advice world and looking at saving, investing, and retirement as well. Like spending the time thinking about your financial goals is one of the most powerful things that you can do. That's why I find this kind of time of year, I know we're past like New Year's resolution side of things, but it's a really important time because that sort of thing is on people's mind, and just working out what your money is for and what you're hoping to achieve over the next 3, 5, 10 years, everything becomes a little bit easier after that. It can be very easy to go day to day, week to week, month to month, paycheck to paycheck, without actually thinking about, right, Why am I working? What am I trying to achieve with this money? So spending that time trying to work out what's really important to you, whether it's getting onto the property ladder, whether it's saving for an early retirement, just saving for a comfortable retirement, whatever it might be, just working that out should always be priority number one. Priority number two then can be, okay, so that's my financial goal. What tools, accounts, tips, education is out there to help me achieve that? So one of the things that we do benefit from in this country is pretty much whatever your financial goal is, there is a financial product or account out there to help you achieve that. So we've talked about, if you're trying to get onto the property ladder, the lifetime ISA is that. If you're just trying to build up an emergency fund, you've got a cash ISA, which is a fantastic place for that. If you want to build wealth or invest for the future, you've got your stocks and shares ISA. And if you've got a retirement goal where you'd like a comfortable retirement or early retirement, you can start looking at stocks and shares, lifetime ISA, or a pension. So once you get that financial goal, it's about, right, what help is there to help me achieve that? And then the third thing for aspiring first-time buyers in particular is just looking at the lifetime ISA itself. So, right, is this thing suitable for me? Am I looking to buy under £450,000? Do I need access to this money in an emergency? If it ticks kind of the boxes for you, it's just about maximizing that government bonus as much as you possibly can do. You just don't get £1,000 of free money really anywhere else. So trying to maximize that as much as you possibly can do. If you're buying with somebody else, they can also use a lifetime ISA, and you can combine those together. So that's potentially £2,000 from the government you can get every year. And we are coming towards what's called tax year end, where all of your allowances reset. So one of the things we're talking to customers about at the moment is the tax year end finishes on the 5th of April. If you're in a position to maximize your lifetime ISA either side of that, you can benefit from two of these government bonuses kind of very quickly. So long way of saying is, say, top three for me is working out your financial goal, the products and tools that can help you get there. And if your goal is getting onto the property ladder, having a really good look at the lifetime ISA and trying to get as much government bonus as you possibly can.
Amazing. Well, Brian, thank you very much for joining me on the Let's Buy a Home podcast. Where can our listeners find out more about yourself and also Moneybox?
So you can have a look at the Moneybox website, or probably the easiest way is just going onto the App Store and downloading the app. There's a lot of financial education work on there, and you can learn all about the lifetime ISA as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining me, and thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you did find this conversation useful, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks for having me.